Big welcome everybody. So today's tutorial I want to show you how to do, I would class as a fairly simple design that would be easy enough to copy at home for anybody that maybe just has an interest in flowers, or even people that have done flower arranging classes. So it's going to be a step-by-step tutorial. If you do have any questions, you can always place them in the comments below. So first of all, we're going to use this container. So this is just a ceramic container, and obviously you can substitute it for something that maybe you have at home. I'm doing it quite big for the demonstration, but this can obviously be done on a much smaller scale. Now, if some of you have done classes with us before, or you're planning on doing classes with us before, with all our courses, we provide all the materials. Now, that would be all the professional floristry programs, okay? So we send you out a kit with all your containers, etc., and then you get your fresh flower delivery, and then you're watching the tutorial and you're able to copy it. But in this instance, obviously, I'm not sending you out anything, so I'm just going to make suggestions of what you can use instead. Now, if you ever have any off-cut pieces of floral foam, don't throw them out. Just use them for kind of filling up these containers, because it'll cost quite a lot of money to fill it up with full blocks of foam, when normally you find that you have lots of off-cuts. And again, you can fill the container with water as well. But make sure for the piece of foam that you use for actually making the flower arrangement in, make sure that's a nice block of foam. Now, I normally recommend to use the Oasis brand. You mightn't see it on camera here, but printed onto this block of foam, it actually says the company that's called Oasis. And I know we all call it Oasis, but really the proper name for it is actual floral foam. So I'm going to cut about 3/4 of a block there. For cutting it, I use one of these little Oasis florist knives, but to be honest, any knife will do the job. And it's a bit like getting the square peg into the round hole. I could cut the corners off, but I'm going to cheat, and you see I'm just pressing it down into it. And then using my little Oasis knife there, I'm just going to trim off the edges. And the little bits that I cut off, just to save the table, I'm just going to throw them down into the container as well, because they're all holding water, and then when you're filling it up with water, it just helps to absorb. And I always like to trim along the edges. Again, this is a habit. It was something I was taught when I was trained in floristry. I always do it, and it's gas. I train my students to do it as well, and it's a bit like kind of like the circle of life, okay? So there we are, well strapped in, nice and secure. It is heavy enough, it is. And what you can do then is you can fill that with water. See the way there's lots of space there? You can fill this with water, and this will help to prolong the life of your flowers. Now, what you next need then is anchor tape. Now, when you're buying anchor tape, there is another version of the tape out there called pot tape, P-O-T. And personally, I find it's not as strong as the anchor tape. So if possible, buy the anchor tape. So stretch the tape, cut the piece of tape that you need, stretch it across the top of the foam, and then stick it, you see, onto your container. But cut off the surplus piece, and then bring that along the edge there, as close up to the edge as possible, and that acts as an extra bit of security. Again, that little piece there that hadn't stuck down onto the pot, trim it off a little bit shorter, okay? And then just place it along the top there, just to give you an extra bit of security. Now, I never trust one piece of tape. When I had classroom paced courses, the students used to laugh at me, because my favourite saying, one of my favourite sayings, I've loads of them, to be sure, to be feckin' well sure, okay? So always put a second piece of tape across the top, never trust the first piece, you know the way, just in case some idiot holds it upside down and you don't want the arrangement kind of falling. So again, I've done the same thing there. You can see the way I've cut the tape shorter and then placed it kind of like horizontal across the top there as an extra bit of security. Now, when you're on the classes here at Case Flower School, online or even classroom based, we go through all the suppliers, the wholesalers, we organise trade cards for the students so that they can buy their stuff wholesale, and we even get them all set up with an account with Holland so they can buy all their flowers direct. We go through the cost prices, we go through the selling prices, and basically, like any questions that the students have, they're all made a member of a bloom room, so they're able to ask any questions, they'll get help and they'll get support. Now, with this sort of contemporary style, first of all, you need something to give you a little bit of height, and often I say to give a little bit of movement in the arrangement. So these are these white birch twigs. Now, you can use willow twigs as well, but these are the birch twigs. And I buy these from a foliage farm that's actually based down in Wicklow. And they're very reasonably priced, okay? I probably have about 150's worth of twigs here in my hand. but there's nothing to stop you going out to your garden and using the branches of your own birch tree or the neighbour's birch tree. But obviously with the container being white, it just suited me that these I don't spray these white, by the way. They came in sprayed white already. I bought them in. And he has them in lots and lots of different colours. So like at the Christmas courses, I also used them in red. And then for Valentine's Day, I have them in red. We buy them in a natural colour. And then for Mother's Day, I have them in pinks. For Easter, I have them in yellows. You know the way he does pale blues for baby boys, baby girls. He has kind of pale peach colour, lots and lots of different ones. And again, like once you buy them in, like again, you can just store them in your garage or your shed, you know that way, and they're going to last for ages. You don't have to put them into water or anything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring most of these twigs up vertical, okay? So they're going up straight. And the mistake that people make is they might go east and west, as in you put some in that way and put some in that way. That's completely wrong, okay? So whatever you do, don't do that. And I don't know what sort of age group we have watching this tutorial, but if you're as old as me, do you remember when you were a kid and we didn't have Sky Movies or Cable Link or all them fancy gadgets for getting all the television channels? We used to have a thing called the bunny's ears that sat on top of the telly, and it looked like that with the two wires. I remember when my dad's, when the one we had, when it used to break, Dad used to use a wire co-hanger. Now again, I'm often talking about wire co-hangers, and some of the students, they say to me, no Janette, like we have wooden ones or velvety flocked ones that we got from pennies. So here I am just coming out a little bit more to the side and either side there, just to add a little bit of width to the arrangement. But what I'm avoiding is none of the twigs are tipping off each other where they're going into the foam. Each one of them has their own space on the foam, and that's really, really important. If you overload the foam in one particular area, what happens is it'll actually collapse and then everything falls out. And when stuff starts to fall out, what do? Shove it back in again. And when you shove it back in again, or the customer shoves it back in again, they also make another bloody big hole in the floral foam, and then you have a bloody disaster on your hands, okay? So it's really important that, like, when you look at it there, you can see like there's lots and lots of spaces in between all them twigs. And again, it's nicely secured. Now I'm happy enough with the amount of twigs that I have used, but again, if you prefer and you want to use a little bit less or a little bit more, absolutely. Now just to point out a few little features. Now obviously when you're here on a class, I'm teaching you all the basics, all the fundamentals, okay, the rules of flower arranging, the principles of flower arranging. There's so much I have to cover, where today I'm going to try and keep it very simplified, that this is more kind of like ready, steady, cook. Here is the ingredients, and this is what you do with the ingredients. But when you're standing these twigs up vertically, it's important that they're slightly lying back. Can you see the way they're not standing up dead straight? There's a slight fall on them. And I used to kind of joke with my students, and I'd say to them, it was like, you think now I was always drinking, but it'd be like when you have a few drinks on you, and you know the way you'd be just nicely relaxed. This is a backdrop, so I don't want to lie against it. But you know the way you'd lie back against a wall or a doorway and you're nicely relaxed. Well, think about that when you're doing this flower arrangement, that them twigs are lying slightly away from you. And that's what actually gives you visual balance, okay? So in this particular flower arrangement, as my main flower, okay, I'm going to use orchids, a stem of orchids. Now when you say orchids, people always think, oh my God, like these must be madly, madly expensive. Believe it or not, they're in season from September to March, okay? And especially like around kind of Christmas time, the prices of them drops. They come in like this scissors could do being sharpened. The price of them drops because they come in nearly every colour except red. And at Christmas time, everybody is looking for them in red. So the price drops, and the thing is, they're in season, they're readily available, and they're a great lasting flower, and they thrive on the heat. So if you were making this as an arrangement, so like for decorating your home for Christmas, orchids are absolutely brilliant. If anything, they absolutely hate the cold. So if you have the heat turned up to the last, and you have it on morning, noon and night, they'll be absolutely delighted. Now with the stem of orchids, that's the back of it and that's the front of it. Now like that one's quite obvious. It's obvious which is the back and which is the front. But sometimes you can get a stem of orchids and the back of it could look nearly as good as the front, you know that way, but normally the front will look nicer. So just double check and make sure that you are actually using the right side as in the front facing out. So I want these twigs a little bit shorter than I want this stem of orchids a little bit shorter than the twigs that I've already inserted. So I'm going to cut it about down here. There's quite a thick stem on them, okay? So cut them on a nice sharp 45 degree, and I'm going to keep it slightly over to one side, okay? Now again, I want them to lie back as if they also have a few drinks on them, okay? Slightly tilted back. So that would mean inserting it kind of into the front of the foam, okay? I will turn it to me when I'm doing it, but can you see that I'm going towards the front of the foam, that they lie back? Where if you insert it back there, they'll naturally fall forward on you, you know, that way. So like thinking of all these rules, like when you're placing a flower into floral foam, it's not necessarily where it goes into the floral foam. Just because it goes in there doesn't mean it's going to stay there, because just to show you, and I haven't actually made a hole, do you see the way I can angle or tilt it to go anywhere? So it's more where is the flower actually placed. So place the flower where you want it to go, then have a quick check on the floral foam and make sure that you're hitting the floral foam. But my eyes are focusing on the actual flower. And when I'm happy, yeah, that's exactly where I want you, then I push it down into the floral foam. And then you can see the way it's resting against them twigs, you know, that way, or as I call it, the pub door or the wall outside, you know, that way, wherever you're after being, having a few drinks inside. Now, because it's kind of a Christmassy theme to this display, I'm going to bring in some red Germany. Now, Germany wouldn't be a long-lasting flower, but they are a great flower around Christmas time, and again, they're not that expensive. But if you wanted to substitute it for a flower that's going to last a lot longer, what about a large carnation? Or another flower, and you may not be as familiar with this flower, it's called leucadendron, definitely in season around Christmas time, and again a really good long lasting flower. Some people class it as a foliage rather than a flower, but anyway, I'm going to use the Germany. Now with Germany, it's really important, and Germany just means mini gerberas, by the way. But it's really important that you condition and you treat all the flowers properly. Now, just to save time today, I'm not going to go through the conditioning of all the fresh flower and the material. But if you go to our YouTube channel, which is Kay's Flower School, you can Google, or you can search up hundreds and hundreds of what we call top tip videos for treating Germany, for treating Lysianthus, for treating Cymbidium orchids, and so on. Another place that you can find them is actually on our website. So on our website, we have two buttons specifically for the students. One is a student resource, okay, and this is like continuous mentorship and continuous tuition for all our present and our past students, and they will all have their own personal login and passwords to access that. But then we also have, for the public, we have what's called the blog button. So all you have to do is search our website, flowerschoolisland.com, look up the blog button, and again search down, and you'll find lots of tutorials on actually treating different types of flowers. Now again, with the Germany, you have a front and a back. Some people like to stem wire or support wire Germanies. I personally am not going to do it because I'm happy enough with the treatment and the conditioning that I have done. But again, in the tutorials, I do cover a little bit of that. Normally with the Germany, they're roughly around the same size. It's unusual to get variations in the size of the flower heads. But if you were using a different type of flower head, you may find that you have a small one, a medium one, and a large one. So a little rule to be aware of, you always start with a smaller flower and you always finish with a bigger flower, and obviously the medium ones are kind of somewhere in between. So it's kind of like smaller, a bit bigger, a bit bigger, a bit bigger, much bigger, absolutely huge, and a big fat one down the bottom. Do you know the way? So they're getting bigger as they come down. And I often say to the students, it's a bit like my body. Small head, big boobs, fatter stomach, and a big fat bum, you know that way? So think of your flower arrangements working the same way. But as I said, with the Germany, there's not a massive difference. This one is a little bit smaller. So we'll start with this one. So I'm going to start the Germany to the opposite side of the orchids, okay? Now it's really important that you do not come up to the same height as the orchids, and that's a mistake people make. In floristry, we call it competition, okay? So where my twigs are here, my orchids are down lower, and the Germany is going to be down lower again. Now I know if we have any doctors or nurses watching here, they might say, oh God, red and white, you know that way, unlucky for some. It's kind of one of these superstitions that they have in hospitals, red and white, blood and bandages, and they don't agree with it, or they're that little bit superstitious about it. But if you think about it, there's nothing like dear El Santi. And dear El Santi has always wore red and white clothes for the last, I don't know, 100 years, 1,000 years. And listen, he doesn't bring bad luck, he always brings happy surprises. So I'm not really worried about the red and white, but I'm going to bring a bit of silver into it as well, and obviously some greenery as well. Now normally with flowers, we talk about cutting them on an angle, cutting them on a slant, because they insert into the floral foam that little bit easier for you. But with Germany, because they have a hollow stem, I recommend that you cut straight across, okay? So this time I'm cutting the next Germany a little bit shorter than the previous one, okay? I'm going to step in front of it a little bit, and I'm going to insert the flower head slightly to the right hand side. And I'm going to turn that around to you just so that you can see it. So can you see the way it's a little bit shorter, but it's slightly angled to the right hand side. Now you might look at the stem and you might say, God, the stem is over the opposite side, and that was something I was trying to explain to you. It's not necessarily where the flower goes into the foam, it's where the flower is actually positioned, okay? And again, if you were to look at it sideways, can you see what I mean about the way one is stepped in front of the other? Again, it's a mistake that people do with flower arrangements when you're only starting and you don't know any of the rules or the principles, okay? Is you make your arrangements nearly like a curtain on the backstage, that all the flowers are just flat against the wall, where it's really important that you kind of get that 3D effect by stepping them forward and coming forward all the time. And that's another reason why at the very beginning, do you remember when I was getting everything to lie back slightly, do you know that way? So that gave me the space to do it. Now my next Germany is going to be a little bit shorter than the previous one, but this time it's going to go to the opposite side. I won't say the right or the left, because sometimes if you're watching this on Instagram, it mirror images it and it goes the opposite way to what I'm explaining. So to the other side. So a little bit shorter to the other side. So again, just to let you see it there. And if I was to turn it sideways, can you see the way I'm stepping out in front of it each time? The next flower, and you can use as many of them as you want or as you wish, because sometimes when it comes to flowers and flower numbers, people say, oh, it has to be an uneven number. Now you're not completely wrong, okay? But in traditional flower arranging, yes, we use 3, 5, 7, 9, 11 and 13. We use all the uneven numbers. Now imagine running into a church and saying there's 12 flowers in that. They didn't use 11 or 13. As the numbers get bigger, you don't notice it so much. But definitely with smaller scale arrangements, it is kind of important that you have this 3 or this 5 kind of like technique. But I'm doing kind of a more modern arrangement or contemporary style today, so the number doesn't matter. So I'm working from the height that I picked, and I'm working my way down through the display. And again, just to let you see there how I'm working, can you see the zigzag coming down through the display? And then if I turn it sideways, you can see the way I changed the angle of the flower there, so that I got it to actually look out. Now, remember, with all our professional training courses, you know that we cover all this in detail. Like I have a lot more time. I'm a little bit restricted on time here because Deirdre wants me to try and get another few arrangements done. You know that way, just there's a petal missing off that one, so I'm going to leave that one out. But I'll show you something that I can do with that afterwards, okay? So there's actually a petal missing off this one as well, but you listen, I'll use it. They must have got a little bit kind of damaged. But that last flower that I put in, I'm on 6 by the way. Do you see the way I brought it down low on the container? And can you see the way it's facing out? And that when you look at it sideways, can you see the way we're getting that fall on the arrangement? So that's something to be aware of. A lot of people, again, when you start off doing flower arranging, if you kind of don't get the stage effect, the curtains on the back wall, the other thing that they're inclined to do is get pregnant arrangements. And this is where they start back and then they're coming forward, and the flowers actually start to go out like that. They nearly hit the florist in the chest and she comes back in again. So you get what we call a pregnant arrangement. So I want something, no pregnancies on my class unless I have control over it, okay? We don't want any unwanted pregnancies. We want that nice slide coming down the side. So far, I've kind of grouped the material, and that would be another rule in modern arrangements. There's lots of rules, and again, there's not time today to explain all these rules and principles. But one of the rules that you would follow would be grouping the material. So you can see there, I've kept all the germanes to one side, kept the orchids together, and then I have my twigs. Now, what I'm going to add in next, okay, is a little bit of foliage. So I have some Christmas spruce, because we're going to keep this kind of a Christmassy arrangement, and I also have some holly. Now my holly, the berry on it is a little bit immature. You see the way it's just kind of still yellow or still a little bit green, but still going to be nice. But to give me a little bit of red berry, I'll probably add in a little bit of the hypericum berry afterwards. So So to one side of the arrangement, I'm going to add in some of this spruce. Now with all the spruce, it's really important that you clean off all the stems first. By that I mean like pulling off the needles. Do you see off these little needles? And make sure you don't do this in your house and do what I'm doing, throw it on the floor, especially if you have carpet. You'll never get, it'll clog up the hoover by the way, and you'll never get rid of it. So I'm starting there, as you can see, kind of like low down, and then I'm kind of stepping in front, in front, in front. I'll show you now what I mean. I just have about 5 or 6 pieces in there so far. So again, can you see the way I'm getting that 3D effect? Don't just keep it like a border at the back of the arrangement, okay? And then I'm going to work around to the front, and I have a couple of little smaller ones, and you can see the way I'm kind of like sticking up into the floral foam. Do you know the way from the bottom of the arrangement sticking up into it? And then just in among the germinates, I'm just going to bring, kind of like peeping in between them, I'm just going to add in 1 or 2. I'm looking for a smaller one, so I'm just going to recut this, and then you can see what I mean by pulling off the little needles, and then it'll go into the oasis or into your floral foam, and it'll help cover it. Now that's what I've done kind of like so far. I'm not completely finished. I've loads more to do, but as I said, just to give you an idea, I'm just filling in the sides here a little bit more as well. It's really important when you're doing flower arrangements that you cover in your mechanics, like where your oasis is strapped in, or the anchor tape is showing, you know what I mean, or the little gaps or the little spaces, where people again often concentrate on the front of the arrangement and they forget about the back. Think about it. If you even bought a pair of knickers in pennies and it was on a hanger, you'd lift up the hanger and you'd turn around and you'd look at the back of the knickers to see if they're a thong or it'd be a nice comfortable pair. Now I'm sure the fellas do the same, in case we've any fellas watching when they're buying their boxers. I'm sure it's exactly the same. So now what I'm going to do is over the opposite side of the arrangement, I'm going to add in the holly, and I have this fabulous variegated holly. Now it is prickly holly, but it's not too prickly, okay, so it's actually nice enough to use. And again, just the berry on I think is going to be fabulous. Again, it being that kind of like greeny kind of cream colour, I think it's going to complement the colour of the orchids. So I'm doing a kind of a similar effect. You can see the way, I'll leave that bigger one there for the moment. You can see the way I'm kind of like bringing it in, kind of like from the back here, kind of coming up. And then I'm working my way forward, kind of around to the side. I'm going to turn it around now just to kind of give you an idea now what I'm doing. Can you see the way that's working? I'm going to step in front of it the same way I did the spruce. And then I'm going to cut a few smaller pieces, and I'll use them for kind of sticking up in the front of the arrangement upwards into the floral foam. Seem to be taking over all the table here I am. I'm a bit of an untidy worker. Here I'll tell you that, like I'm an awful messy worker. And don't waste any of that lovely berry that you can get your hands on. Isn't that just fabulous there? Do you know the way? Do you know, I'm going to actually bring that one up there at the back there. Don't waste it. Even though I wasn't planning on bringing greenery up at all, I just absolutely love that bit of berry. Now I have a couple of smaller ones here, which I'm going to sit in the front. And again, I'm going to like upwards into the floral foam in the front, like the way I did the, just need that one to be a bit shorter, like the way I did the spruce in under the germinate. I'm doing something very similar here. I'll turn it around to you now in a second, let you see now what I mean. I just need one more little piece. Could probably do with another little bit of filling in, I could, just before I turn it around to you. Stick that one in there, and then we'll turn it around, we'll let you have a little look. Now I'm not finished, okay? So can you see how this is starting to come together? And like I have a lovely little magic bin here that catches all this stuff that I throw on the floor. Now she's on the other side of the camera at the moment, but my little magic bin will come over this side in a little while. Now what I want to do, okay, is I have some apples. Now, the day that I'm actually pre-recording this video, I'm also getting ready for an autumnal display for one of the live classes coming up. And the local girl in our local post office, which I have a complete blank on her name, she told me she had lots of Irish garden apples. So I said to her, bring me in a bag of them. So she did. So with your apple, like you can wash them or you can rub them on your jumper. Do you remember when you were a kid in school? Again, if you were my age, we knew nothing. We knew no different. Do you know what I mean? And we used to always just rub the apple on your jumper and then you would eat it. But see the way it just makes them lovely and shiny? I've rubbed these ones already. But can you see the way it makes them lovely and shiny, okay, your apples, okay? The other thing you can do is you can get a tin of leaf shine and you can spray it on them. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get lollipop sticks, okay, or waxing sticks. So if any of the men are getting their waxing done, ask your beautician for some waxing sticks. And what I'm going to do is pair off or point off both ends of the stick. But otherwise, if you go into any of the art and craft shops, and somebody was telling me on one of the classes before that Mr. Price sells these as well. I'll turn that around there, you can see what's happening. So I have the lollipop sticks cut and I have a point on both ends. As I was just saying there, you can get them in the likes of Mr. Price or the walk around shops. People use them for art and crafts. So I'm now going to stick the lollipop stick up into the apple. Okay, so do that to the 3 of them. And I did just swap one of the apples for a slightly smaller one because the last one I had in my hands there was just a little bit too big. So here we go. There's our 3 apples, okay? And to one side, I'm going to keep the red all over to one side. So here on the right hand side, as I look at the arrangement, where the germany is, I'm now going to insert my 3 apples into the display. I'm going to make sure that the red side, the nice shiny side that I've just rubbed on my jumper, is over this side. So again, we'll just turn that around there that you can see it. Now again, you can substitute that for whatever fruits, like oranges or lemons or limes or whatever it might be. People often say, will they die? Well, the flowers are going to die, you know, that way. So it'll last nearly the same length of time. Now I know if you've done a tutorial with me before, we often talk about fruit and veg and storing them separately in flower shops or in fruit and veg shops, because what happens is the ethylene gas from the fruit and veg can set your flowers off. But in this case here now, with like 3 bloody apples, I'm not going to be worried about any ethylene gas from them. Now because my holly hadn't got the red berry, I'm going to kind of cheat and I'm going to stick a little bit of hypericum berry in among the holly to make it look like it was, you know what I mean, a little bit of the red berry on it. But if your holly has a berry on it, you'll be absolutely fine. You won't have to do that. That was just a little cheat on my part there. Now I'm not finished. I want to bring a little bit more kind of Christmassy into it. So these are poppy seed heads. They're dried flowers and I sprayed them with the silver spray. So this is an Oasis silver spray, but if you've watched me on other previous tutorials, if you haven't, why haven't you? But if you've watched me before, I'm a big believer of the Lidl and the Aldi sprays and I use them all the time. Just happens that I used the Oasis brand. The Lidl and the Aldi ones are about 1/3 of the price. Like you'll get them for £3.50, £3.99, and often the likes of Mr. Price would have them as well. So what I'm going to do is over among the holly, I'm going to use a couple of these dried flowers, okay, kind of like sprayed silver. And as I said, it's just to give another little bit of a touch to the arrangement. Again, giving a little bit of a Christmassy theme to it. Now if you're watching this and you're kind of saying, oh well, I prefer it without the silver, absolutely, like, you know, it'll be your arrangement and you can do it. If you would need any help or any advice, you know, that way, again, you can always contact us to the Facebook page or the Instagram page or message us and we might be able to, hopefully we'll be able to sort you out. So what I'm just doing there is just cutting these stems and inserting them. I'm going to bring a few more to the back, but just so that you can see it there in the front. Can you see the way I started at the back and then I worked my way forward? Now I know lots of people do ask us about our Christmas program. Our Christmas program normally is way before Christmas, okay? You can always check our bookings page on the website for the exact date. And normally what we do is we demonstrate between 25 and 30 different designs. We give you a breakdown of all the ingredients, or the recipes as we call it, that we use, the different suppliers, what it's going to cost and what it's going to sell at, you know, that way. So the idea is whether you're a beginner student, an intermediate or an advanced student, there's something there for absolutely everybody. There's something for everybody to learn. And as I said, for anybody that just needs that little kick in the backside to get them kind of going again, the Christmas course is absolutely brilliant for them. Now, if any of you watching, I'm going to insert a couple of pine cones here, but if anybody watching and you would like to maybe copy this design or something similar, we'd really appreciate if you were to post a photograph of it over in our Kay's Flowery Fun Group. Just Google Kay's Flowery Fun Group and it'll come up. Now the Fun Group, it's not a commercial group, it's for people that like flowers as a hobby. In saying that, we do have a lot of flower shops or members, or a lot of the students who are running their own businesses, and they're actually members of it. But it's a great group for just kind of like posting up like some of your own material, some of your own designs, and again, just to get a little bit of feedback. But the thing is, we don't encourage, like, there's no badness, there's no giving out. We don't kind of go into critique or that on the Flowery Fun Group. As I said, it's all about fun. But we do have, when you're on our actual programs, on the online programs, we do have a thing called the Bloom Room. And the Bloom Room is like your virtual interactive classroom. And this is where all the students are made a member of the Bloom Room, and then where they can post photographs of their work. And this is where we do give feedback, we do give critique, we do advise you, we do help you, we do support you. Because when people think about online courses, I'm just going to put these two little heads in the back. When people talk about online courses, they often feel it's like an online course where you just take your money and then you're left to your own device. I can guarantee at Case Flower School that isn't how it happens. Now we do take your money, we do. But like, you're going to get lots of help and lots of support all the time. Like, we really kind of encourage, we love to see our students kind of, just this little broken head, I'm going to stick it in the back as well. Waste not, want not. We love to see our students getting on, and like even past students that are finished with us, like say for years and years and years, we still kind of keep in contact with them, or they can keep in contact with us, again, if they need any help or any advice with any weddings or events that they have. So listen, if you have any questions on any of the courses held here at Case Flower School, why don't you drop us an email, info@flowerschoolireland.com. If you want to have a look at the syllabus and what exactly we cover on Module 1, 2, 3 or 4, go to the website flowerschoolireland.com. Or if you prefer to have a little chat, either with myself or Deirdre or Sinead or even Leah, why don't you just give us a ring? Mobile number for the office is 086 26 444 72, or the landline number is 4538 649. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed that tutorial.